That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Eileen, the sophomore film directed by William Oldroyd, which premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival. It is being released in a limited theatrical window by Neon on December 1st, 2023, before it expands on December 8th.
2023.
Yes.
Okay.
Same year. Mm-hmm.
Same year. Got it. The director?
William Oldroyd.
Did you say directorial debut?
Sophomore.
Oh, what's their first film?
Lady Macbeth, starring Florence Pugh, which I love. And if you like Florence Pugh and haven't seen that movie, you need to get on it.
You really like this movie.
I did really like this movie. We've had a lengthy conversation about it, and I am in agreement with your critiques of it as well. But this has been a great year for Anne Hathaway. Just between this and the Rebecca Miller film, She Came to Me, which I know a lot of people poo-pooed as well, I just see her in a completely different light.
Good. Well, I thought she was great in this too.
Loved it.
Okay, this story. A woman's friendship with a new co-worker at the prison facility where she works takes a sinister turn. What's your pull quote?
Anne Hathaway crackles as a psychotic Hitchcockian blonde in this demure, increasingly bizarre psychological melodrama.
Mine. Anne Hathaway shines and the titular character is compelling, but Eileen left me with more questions than answers. I did enjoy this movie. I do think it's good, but you know, I would have rearranged this story a little bit. So you saw it a while ago.
I saw it at out of Sundance. By far, this was I think my favorite film from this year's Sundance Film Festival.
And you liked it so much.
I liked it so much, it left me wanting so much more. I'm like, I need to read this book. So I read, which was written by Otessa Moshfegh, and her husband, Luke Goebel, adapted it for the screen. And I'd say there are some key differences, but I don't know. It's not always fun to read the book after seeing the film, but Moshfegh's book is really good.
Okay, this story, Eileen, played by
Thomasin McKenzie.
So she's a young woman who works at like a boys' correctional facility, so it's young men there.
1964, Massachusetts.
And she appears to be like an assistant or like a secretary. She just helps around, like transporting people, helping the psychiatrist, the psychologist, helping the like front desk people. And one day a new psychologist shows up, played by Anne Hathaway.
Rebecca.
And immediately Eileen takes a liking to Rebecca. And it's clear Rebecca is a little off, but charming, and is wanting... I don't want to be leading, but she seems like she knows that she can get something from Eileen.
She knows that she sees someone she can manipulate.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel insidious. It just is like, well, you know.
It feels like she's used to people treating her that way.
Yes, that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Eileen is slowly falling in love with Rebecca when one day Rebecca doesn't show up to work and the other secretaries say, oh, well, she's going to be gone until after the holidays.
And that funny redhead is Siobhan, Fallon, Hogan, who I know you've seen.
Yes, I recognize her and I thought she was good in this movie. Yeah. She's funny. She's kind of nasty.
She always has this little flavor that she gives, these little character roles.
I liked it. So, of course, Eileen's kind of upset because she wants to see more of Rebecca. And then... one day she gets a phone call. It's important to know Eileen lives with her dad, played by
Shea Whigham,
who is an alcoholic derelict,
ex-police chief
who likes to stand outside and make racist comments to his Asian neighbor and like wave around a gun. And we also learn that Eileen has a sister who we're told is prettier, who the dad used to
it's clear
molest.
He probably molested her, and she doesn't come around no more. Yeah.
So Eileen hates her dad. Mm-hmm. And he seems to hate her, but they have this weird toxic codependent relationship, so they live together. But anyway, one day while Eileen is at home during this holiday break Rebecca's taking, she gets a phone call from Rebecca talking about, oh, come over to my house to have like a little get together.
It's Christmas Eve. This is a Christmas movie.
Yeah, this is a Christmas movie. So I wrote down the line Rebecca tells her, but when Eileen shows up, Rebecca tells Eileen, and this is when the movie got good to me, which is like at the hour point. This isn't my house. This is the Polk house. I have Mrs. Polk tied up downstairs. So who's the Polk? There's a boy at the correctional facility.
Lee Polk, who is played by Sam Nivola, the son of Alessandro, I believe.
Who is incarcerated because he killed his own father.
Like brutally.
Brutally.
And the mother who was sleeping in bed next to the father, played by Marin, Ireland, says
She doesn't know what.
she didn't wake up, thought it was a break-in.
So Rebecca, Anne Hathaway, the psychologist, we find out showed up to this house because she doesn't believe that this boy just randomly killed his dad. She thinks the mom has some splaining to do. So she goes to the house. This movie is really about unprofessionalism because a psychologist goes to this mother's house and confronts her, and the mom, of course, gets upset.
We don't see this.
We don't see it.
These are in Rebecca's words.
Yes. So we can't trust the narrator, maybe, but she says, I confronted her, she got upset, tried to attack me, so I...
busted a chair over her head and tied her up.
Exactly. So now this bitch is in the basement, and I called you over because you need to help me get her to confess. And the best scene in the movie is the actor who I really liked in another movie we reviewed.
Rebirth. Marin, Ireland. She's also really good in The Dark and the Wicked.
Yeah, I liked her in this movie as well. And I think the best scene is when she is explaining, she finally gets scared enough to tell the truth.
Because also, fortuitously, Eileen has inherited her father's pistol.
So Eileen is pointing a gun at this lady, talking about, you need to tell us what you know about this boy and why he killed his dad. And the mom says, a trigger warning, more sexual abuse, that my husband was raping my son. And I let him do it because...
He was nicer to me
afterwards. We can talk more about it maybe because I don't want to get demonetized. But that was crazy as hell. So Eileen gets so upset she shoots the lady.
It's not clear if she's upset at the woman's actions. She shoots her after she starts telling Eileen that she's basically young and ignorant and doesn't know what it's like to be a mother in a terrible marriage in the 1960s.
Right. Yeah, actually. Mm-hmm. So Anne Hathaway's character, Rebecca, freaks out and tries to kill this lady by making her down a bunch of pills. And then the lady appears to be dead. And Rebecca's like, what are we going to do? Eileen says, well, let's bring her to my house. Everyone knows my dad's crazy and abusive. I hate him. You said he's better off dead.
She was shot with his gun.
And I shot her with his gun. So everyone will think that he did it if I take her over there.
And you and I can run away to New York and have a wonderful New Year's Eve.
Because Eileen is in love with Rebecca.
She says it, yeah.
And Rebecca goes, okay, well, why don't you go ahead and I'll clean up the scene. So Rebecca goes back to the house and waits all night long. Morning comes and Eileen never shows. Or Rebecca never shows. So Eileen takes the body. She carried this lady in her own car, like Eileen's car, put this lady in her own car.
Takes her cash, her mama's fur coat.
And takes this lady in the car to the woods and leaves the car running. Because we know that the car has an issue with the exhaust. So like...
And she can't have the heat on or she'll basically suffocate.
So Eileen leaves the lady in this car running with the windows up in the woods and then hitchhikes away, the end. So we don't know what happens. We can talk about how it differs from the book. But that's the story. Mm-hmm. Okay. What did I like? I like how the film looks. Mm-hmm. I think the performances from every single person in the movie are very strong. Mm-hmm. And it is very fascinating. I just think that the film... We spend a lot of time, it just feels really thin for what ends up happening. Like I wanted to better, what did I say? I was hoping that it would be more like the movie Monster mixed with To Die For.
Death and the Maiden.
Like I wanted to see these two women's relationship and how it got so toxic that this Eileen character would do this. I don't understand why Rebecca, the psychologist, went to this lady's house, did all this, and then it's so coincidental that you have this newfound friend who would come and help you take care of it.
See, so the book is told as a flashback of the Eileen character years later, looking back on this incident and kind of pondering what it was about Rebecca in the first place anyway, what was Rebecca thinking about me in these moments, before maybe plotting to use me in this way. And upon watching the film a second time, I feel like I get the sense that a character like her, who's this, beautiful flower in this dismal, wintry, dreary place, is kind of on her way downhill. Like she's a Harvard graduate from New York, and what is she doing here exactly and why? And it seems like she's kind of a loose cannon and maybe has burned some bridges.
Yeah, that's clear.
Is the story I'm making up for her in the back of my mind, like,
No, it makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Of her behavior.
I guess I wanted the story to maybe start with Rebecca and Eileen both knocking on the door of this mother's house. And then the altercation happens. We end up in the basement. And then we start learning. This is where the death in the maiden part comes in, where we learn from holding this woman captive what actually happened to this boy, but also how these two women sort of came to be. And then I was hoping, or it would have been nice to have the final act be, where does Eileen end up? Because based on the book and what you just said, it seems like Eileen got away with it because she is an old woman telling her story.
Well, also, Mrs. Polk doesn't die at the end of the book, and it leaves it pretty ambiguous here.
There's a lot in this movie that is really vague and doesn't make sense to me. Like, why did Eileen think anyone would assume that her dad... Like, there's so much evidence pointing to you being responsible. Rebecca's actions don't make sense to me.
But it's the 1960s. I don't know. Like, how much...
I'm just going to go through my notes. So Eileen is a little freak. When we meet her, she's sitting in her car like at, what do they call them? Like a lookout point.
Like a lover's lane.
Where people go to park and neck.
Neck, suck face.
And Eileen is watching a couple make out in their car, and she is getting all hot and bothered. And it's wintertime in New England. So this nasty girl grabs some dirty snow from the ground and shoves it down her crotch to cool down.
Take the top layer, please. But yeah.
But we see her imagining a lot of things. We see her imagining that she's having pretty rough sex with one of the correctional officers at work. And then when she wakes up from that dream, we see her, basically like masturbating in like the lobby of her job. We see her imagining that she kills herself,
her dad.
And you said in the book, we get a lot more of her sort of...
Her interiority is obviously, a lot greater and a lot more in-depth and a lot more morbid, actually, and very funny, actually.
You see her being very... she seems very, self-repressed because she likes sugar, she says, but we see that she likes to open up a piece of candy, chew on it, and spit it out. So like that Sex in the City episode... And then we see her trash cans filled with candy that she's just spit out.
Yes, and she's also been treated in a certain way, by her coworkers, especially by her father, that has kind of kept her in a certain place of feeling, homely or invisible. The relationship between the father and daughter reminded me of something straight out of a Jim Thompson pulp noir. I thought that was great. And like just how he'll tell her she's dirt in one instance, and then also, but you wouldn't end up killing yourself because you're actually really nice.
He's really verbally abusive, and he's just gaslighting this poor girl.
But then they get bombed together.
And then she has to hide his shoes in the car so he won't go outside waving his gun. And
There's a lot of very nice touches. It also the lesbian component also reminded me. Well, Rebecca, obviously. Nobody's dreaming of Manderley here, but is very Mrs. Danvers, obsessed with her mistress thing. But also a new wave Claude Chabrol film called Les Biches. I thought of quite a bit, and there's murder involved in that.
There's a funny scene where the boys at this correctional facility put on an annual Christmas show called Christmas in Prison. And the one
Siobhan.
She gives like an announcement beforehand talking about y'all raggedy ass kids are not going to disrupt this music or this performance, and
they're going to do it.
I thought that was funny.
You made a young man dress up as the Virgin Mary. You know that these children are not going to behave.
So we know instantly when Eileen meets Rebecca that she's smitten, and Rebecca can tell, and then she has her show her to the locker room, and they kind of bond and Rebecca likes to ask questions in a way that's she does this. I think Anne Hathaway's character is written very well in the way she asks Eileen questions to sort of disarm her, but then she'll be like, I'm just kidding. Like, you're safe with me. And then Rebecca asks Eileen out for like a drink.
She's leading her on. But at the point that she asks her out for the drink, that's when we see Marin, Ireland, who Rebecca has called in to visit the prison because the mother hasn't come to visit her son. And by the time they have drinks, their wheels are already in motion in Rebecca's mind of what she wants to do.
Yeah. But that bar scene is fun because like Rebecca's toying with some guys who are flirting with them. They start dancing together, which is kind of seen as like kind of provocative. These two women dancing. Some man approaches Rebecca trying to push up on her, and she knocks the hell out of that man.
I love how those scenes are shot too, because we're focusing on this kind of luminescent blonde hair.
Yeah, she looks great.
And that is, I think, the Hitchcockian element is pushed, I think, because of the blondness. In the book, I believe she's a redhead.
Oh. One little detail that I thought was funny after we learned that Rebecca she's not at her house, she's at Mrs. Polk's house, is when she opens the door for Eileen, the cat is acting crazy. Rebecca's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, my cat's possessed." But then you learn, oh, that's because that's not your house.
The cat is screaming. She doesn't even say my cat. She's like, that cat's possessed.
I thought that was really funny. Then Eileen excuses herself to the bathroom and finds what she thinks is Rebecca's soap. And then she sees a little short and curly on there, thinking it's Rebecca's pubic hair. So she takes it. But when she realizes that it's not her house, I assume that the face she made was more like she was disgusted that that pubic hair doesn't belong to the love of her life.
Right. But there are so many red flags in that scene. She's wearing, because Rebecca's a very fashionable woman, and she's wearing this like ugly kind of knitted sweater over her dress. And she doesn't know where the bottle opener is. She's only has pickles to offer her.
Yeah, knowing the reality of it after the fact, it's like, oh gosh, this was...
You think a woman like this lives in this house? Okay.
Okay, this is like, adult content, but the topic of the mother knowing her husband was abusing their son. When she started talking about how she started getting infections, which I'm assuming were UTIs related to her husband.
And fecal matter, yeah.
And fecal matter with the son. And then the wife saying, so, in order to help the situation, she was making her son clean before he would go to bed. And then that's what stopped her getting the infections. I was like...
And the book takes it a little further because she starts feeding him certain foods that help.
Well, but anyway, yeah, like this mom is, wow.
But you also understand, she says, who was I supposed to go to?
Yeah, yeah.
You have to understand this community in this time and place. There'd also be a certain sense of ruination for the son and her.
It's provocative, it's dark.
Not to excuse that should happen, but you know what I mean? Like, understanding how she rationalized that makes sense to me, even though it's still reprehensible.
It's like the third act is what I wanted the entire movie to be, like that vibe. I didn't feel a lot of like tension. It just all felt very weird and kind of like, well, this girl's weird and a little freak, and then this old unprofessional ass psychologist. That was the vibe that I had for the first hour. And the only thing that kind of kept me going was how much I enjoyed Anne Hathaway.
Sure. And I think Thomasin McKenzie, who's giving me this kind of a young plain Jane Olivia de Havilland.
Yeah, she's great too, and her relationship with her dad is messed up, so that's a story to witness. But it's not really until the final act that it was giving me what I needed.
Sure, but even the score, which is kind of very subdued by Richard Reed Parry, by the end credits when you get this like Circean font of Eileen's name coming up over the traffic, it's like, oh, at this moment this feels pristine to me.
Well, the score had some quirky moments to it that I thought worked well. It's a well-made movie. I don't think the story's bad.
I remember...
I can see why a person would maybe go seek out the book to get...
Yeah, I wanted more. But I remember having conversations after this premiered at Sundance with people that also liked it. Were like, but it also feels like a movie that where it ends, it's like it's just picking up.
Yes, when the movie ended, I'm like, oh, I wish we were at like the 30-minute mark.
But then I don't mind that because it's satisfying in so many ways that I don't mind that it's playing with a sense of formula as well. Like if you're approaching it as just kind of this psychological portrait of really that, by the time the culmination and the three women in the basement, I don't know. I had a very European feel, and that felt very daring to me.
European.
Well, where filmmaking is not maybe so formulaic and a little bit more character-based.
What would you give Eileen?
3.5.
I would give Eileen 3 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.